Hey everybody, this is Professor Truth, and this is a wisdom for today, hopefully short and to the point. I wanted to bring up a couple things. I'm going to talk about the coronavirus in just a little bit, because I have a truth diamond later on in the show, which you want to see, what that was filmed in 2010 that by Bill Ryan of Project Camelot, that says that they had talked in a Illuminati meeting about giving China a cold. I think the word is China will get a cold. And they call it the Anglo-Saxon mission. In other words, coronavirus, it was, according to this, a planned event known in 2005, documented in 2010, 10 to 15 years ago, everybody. And China will get a cold. And it was a racially targeted, bioengineered virus. So I do want to make a clarification. When you hear Bill Ryan talk about the Anglo-Saxon mission in a derogatory context, remember they're impersonators and counterfeiters. So they call themselves Israel, but are not the biblical Israel. They call themselves Judah, but they're not Judah. Okay? And they call themselves Anglo-Saxon, and they're not Anglo-Saxon. They take on these names. I had it down the other day. Let me see if I can remember. They infiltrate, impersonate, defile, and then vilify. Vilify the name. So let's take Germans. They infiltrated Germany. They race mixed with Germans. They infiltrate, impersonate Germans by claiming they're Judah. Then they defile, they get the world to think that Germany is evil, etc. And then they defame, defile, impersonate, infiltrate, impersonate, defile, and vilify. Today, everybody thinks the Germans are bad. That's what they do. So in the same context, they're going to use the name Anglo-Saxon to infiltrate, impersonate, defile, and then vilify. And Bill doesn't understand that. Bill Ryan doesn't understand that. These are not true Anglo-Saxons. And it is an Anglo-Saxon mission, but that's likely a code word. A code word, because God does have a plan in that regard. So again, keeping that short, you want to watch that. It's coming up here as a truth diamond. I'm going to just summarize some things on the secret space program. And I've been really watching a lot of the series on Gaia by Corey Good and David Wilcock. And they even took those shows down, but God allowed me to grab enough of it, probably all I needed to capture it, because it's really priceless information. So we have Colonel SC and myself, who are very familiar and have worked in these kinds of black projects. And we have these other people I don't know too well, Corey Good, Emery Smith, Jason Rice, and there's a few others on the Cosmic Disclosure. It's a great series, actually, but they leave out Jesus. And that's the whole agenda. I want to make it clear that when you watch Ancient Aliens and you watch Cosmic Disclosure, why the biggest secret there ever is that Satan and his fallen angels, posing as aliens, are running this planet, running the universe in the quarantine section that is in the final judgment. They don't want that out. And in the past, when captured UFOs or alien beings were taken, if you talked about it, you'd be killed. Why are they putting this stuff out freely? Well, because there's a Trojan horse. There's a lie that's riding on this information, and the lie is more valuable to them than the truth that's being exposed. Yes, there's ancient aliens. Yes, and it's complicated. They're not all fallen angels, but a lot of them are. Yes, there's time travel. They have this thing called a 20 and back program. 3 or 4 that didn't know each other. They take you 20 years on an assignment that you sign up for, and they return you less than a second, or some say 15 minutes from when you left. Well, that's called the 20 and back program. They talked about Martians and Germans, Germans are running the Mars base. And of course, they work for the Draconians, what they don't talk too much about. They talk about Antarctica, where Hitler went, and they set up a breakaway society. A lot of people have heard of these things, but they're true, everybody. It's not just speculation. This channel is beyond speculation. Okay, we just tell you what's true. We don't need to we saw UFO. Big deal. Big deal. They've been around for thousands of years. It's in your Bible. What do you think held the waters to allow Moses and the Hebrews to cross over? What do you think that was? Let him a fire by night, a pillar by day, huh? Okay, as part of the secret space program, there's life forms everywhere. Now, I think I'm the only one that I know of that Father Jesus has allowed me to understand this. Remember, I teach cycles on the Truth Channel. We're in the seventh 2,500, 200-year cycle, 2520. Many tekel e farsi cycle. But there's other ages before these last 7 cycles. The cycles are the incarnation periods for judgment. But prior to that, Lucifer was in a morning star position, delegated, and he terraformed and created life forms all over the place. Now, after the rebellion, these life forms took on, in many cases, a hideous nature in a fallen state. We're fallen. Our light body is much more glorious than what you see now. But the angels are like that too. That's why the aliens are so hideous and ugly, because they're in a fallen state, and most of them are fallen angels. But there's other life forms. Now, here's what I think. I'm the only one that understands this. Why do you think these, quote, aliens are so advanced in technology? And they say, oh, we're you in the future. Well, not necessarily. In previous cycles, remember Solomon, nothing new under the sun? When the cataclysmic events, whether it be Planet X or sun explosions, things of that nature that just, they call it extinction level events of the past, have come in all of these cycles. What do you think happens? Well, some people go underground and they ride it out, and they take their technology and their understanding and their advanced wisdom underground. And then when the cataclysm is past, they reemerge, and relative to the now indigenous population, they are gods. They're aliens. They're your space brothers, whatever they pose as. No, they're not. They're just you who survived the last other people, mostly hominoid, that survived the last cycle and went underground. That's what most of these life forms are. They had space travel. There's space travel. There's portals. There's time travel. You can go anywhere you want. This is nothing new under the sun. It's been like this for a long time. Now, I've taught before that Father God gave Lucifer 3 technologies: time travel, cloning, and portals. I guess they're related. But it's confined within 3D space. It's within the quarantine. So, yes, there's a galactic. Remember, there's a counterfeit too. So everything you hear in the New Age, Galactic Federation, New World Order, well, those are counterfeits of the genuine. God, Father Jesus, has a New World Order. They have a counterfeit. Father God has an Anglo-Saxon Caucasian race, the royal priesthood. Well, they have a counterfeit. They've bred in with the seed of Cain to look just like the Anglo-Saxons now. That's who's running the secret space program. So when you hear Germans on Mars, it's not good Germans. Some of them might be, caught up in it, just like some of us were caught up in the angelic rebellion. But most of them have been the seed of Cain that is mixed in with the race, taken on the phenotype white expression to look like us. As I said, we're in many cycles. I'm going fast because these wisdom for todays are supposed to be short. And I'll get into a lot of this later. 3D here on Earth is a zoo. They call it the experiment. Well, yeah. You know what? The secret space stuff is really fascinating. But it leaves out Jesus, of course, and it leaves out the scriptures. They will say, oh, the scriptures are just a book, right? Well, that's the question. Are the scriptures just a book, or are they true? And they are true. We know that because of many reasons. But one reason is, at the name of Jesus, every demon flees. Every exorcism stops at the name of Jesus. There's a reason. There's a reason that all evil is focused on Christians and Jesus. It's Antichrist. There's a reason for that. So one thing they talked about on the 20 and Back program, fractal time, I call it orthogonal time travel, where they go 20 years and they come back less than a second from when they left. They say they are age regressed. Well, I don't think they are. I think they're put into a clone of themselves, and their soul consciousness is a liquid light. No one ever said this except me. A liquid light consciousness is transferred by an advanced technology. How do you think you got in your body in the first place? When you were conceived, egg and sperm, I've taught this before, at day 49, there's a divine spark, and your divine liquid light is sparked into your vessel. Well, that's all they're doing. They found a way to capture your liquid light soul and put it in a different vessel. So they put themselves in a clone. It's not true age regression. So it's all fascinating, and I'll be bringing you a lot more on this. But I wanted to expand your thinking a little bit, because we're all focused on the wrong things. We're focused on the wrong things. You have to know that Jesus is God, and you know it by everything I'm telling you. This amazing technology that they're hiding is a fallen angel technology. There's nothing special, and that's counterfeited off of God, true God's technology. Nothing new under the sun. So with that, here's the truth diamond with Bill Ryan that shows that 15 years ago, they were planning to give China a cold with a racially targeted virus. That means we're there. That means they were a little bit behind their plans, but we're there now, and they're rolling them out. That means you really got to get serious. This is Professor Truth. May God richly bless you. Read Psalm 91. Let it be.
This person wanted to remain anonymous, but he has agreed that we transcribe the audio, and so we've got this as a transcript. And this is going to be released at the same time as the video, because it's important to be able to read the transcript at the same time as you're considering what I'm saying about it here. And as we come into this story, you're going to understand exactly why it's important to get all the information, to hold it all into a very fine balance. And for those people watching this video who don't know about the City of London, the City of London is it's like an enclave. It's like a financial enclave in the heart of London itself. Some people consider it almost a little bit like the Vatican. It's very old, it's very ancient. It's the heart of the financial system, not only of Britain, but possibly the world. Many researchers consider that it's very likely that the City of London calls the shots on the financial systems in America. They've got control over the Federal Reserve, the Bank for International Settlements, a whole bunch of things that happen. This is like the nerve center of the financial world. And it's very Masonic, it's very ancient, it's very traditional. And our source attended a number of meetings with senior Masons. And while many of these were interesting, they were routine by City of London standards. They were discussing financial affairs and so on and so forth. And then in the June 2005, he attended another meeting that he thought was going to be a routine meeting, but actually this was something rather unusual, and he realized it was unusual as soon as he arrived. In fact, in his interview with us, the one which we have the transcript of, you will see that he says that he felt it was an accident that he was there. He shouldn't really have been there. He didn't know what was happening. And as such, he didn't really participate in the meeting. He was there as a little bit as a fly on the wall. He was just listening to what was happening. And at first he didn't even understand what was being discussed. Now, the people there were Masons. There were senior Masons. They were about 25 or 30 people there, including senior politicians who most people in the UK would recognize by name. I do not know who they were. He didn't name them, and I didn't ask them, but he said these are well-known names. The chief of police was there, representatives from the church, representatives from the military, 25 or 30 people. And as he listened to this story being discussed, it was an informal meeting. It wasn't like at a big table with kind of notepads and water glasses and minutes and an agenda and a chairman. There were just people in a room who were talking about all of this stuff. And what they were talking about was a plan that had clearly been made a long time ago. And what they were discussing was they were discussing the implementation of this plan. They were discussing how things were going. The first thing that he heard was they were talking about the fact that Israel didn't look as if it was getting prepared to attack Iran anytime soon. This was a problem. Even back in June 2005, they were apparently concerned that what it was that was planned on some kind of a timeline wasn't rolling out according to schedule, and this was an issue for them. So that attracted his attention very quickly, because he'd never been in a meeting when this kind of thing was discussed. Then they were talking about China and how powerful China was getting, both militarily and financially, very quickly, and that the Japanese weren't doing what they were supposed to do, which was to interfere in some way with the Chinese financial system. They weren't doing that, and this was another problem because China was getting too strong too quickly. Other things that were discussed were, for example, the coming financial crash, the centralization of resources, everything that we saw starting to happen in October 2008. They were planning that and referring to it in their meeting in June 2005. So there was clearly a rollout of some plan here, and he was quite shocked the more that he heard. And when he really realized what was happening, he was extremely shocked. I think that there are a bunch of crazy people there who are extremely determined to do something, and they were in a hurry. And this is important to understand. They were in a rush. to try and roll out this sequence of events. Now, what he described is what the sequence of events was. It starts with Israel attacking Iran. Now, this hasn't happened yet. There have been a number of indications that there are forces which are trying to push this into happening. You've only got to follow the news for the last 2 years to realize that the public is being prepared for a justification for this kind of thing. Iran is being set up as being the bad guys that deserve something to happen to them, and so on and so forth. Now, that's going to be the start of what is like the opening gambit in a big chess game. And the plan is to provoke Iran or China to retaliate. And our guy, our source, who is a military man, is privately as convinced as he can be, although this has never been made public and this is not publicly known, that Iran does have nuclear weapons. He believes that they have been provided by China behind the scenes. And all of this is intended because it's all right with these controlling forces that Iran has nuclear weapons, because they want them to be used. The plan is for either Iran or for China to retaliate after Iran is struck with a nuclear weapon. At that point, there will be a limited nuclear exchange in the Middle East, followed by a ceasefire. He heard this being planned in this meeting. This is being choreographed. It's like the script for a movie. This is exactly what's intended to happen. That things are being set up in many of the Western countries for there to be heavy controls over populations, martial law, increased powers on security forces who are not just the army or the police, but in this rollout of this crazy scenario where it is intended that there will be a limited nuclear exchange in the Middle East, the idea is that as the world looks upon this with horror, then they will demand from their governments that there are heavy controls over travel, over communication, over people who meet, over people who protest in the streets. They want to make sure that they don't have crazy bombers on airplanes, crazy bombers in the shopping malls. They want to make sure, and because people will be driven into fear by this, they'll request and demand and insist on heavy controls from their governments, which will be justified. And this is where you're going to kind of get the martial law situation in all the Western countries. It's intended as a justification. All of this is just the start of something, because this story gets much bigger, and it's pretty horrifying. During the time of this ceasefire, everyone's shocked, everyone's frightened, everyone's really terrified about where this is going to go. There are all kinds of heavy controls over populations everywhere. And then the next thing that happens in this chess game that's being played is that biological weapons are released on China. He heard this being discussed in this meeting. They will release a flu-like virus that will be genetically targeted against the Chinese population. It's racially targeted against the Chinese people. It's designed to spread like wildfire and to knock out a large number of the Chinese people. And these people in this meeting were laughing about this. They said, China will catch a cold. Those were their words. China will catch a cold. And they were laughing about the fact that these biological weapons will wreak havoc among the Chinese population. And after that, then what effectively will be a kind of plague will actually spread right across the world to the West as well. Our source was not clear whether this was a Chinese retaliation or whether the thing would just spread out of control in the way that it would be very understandable if it did, whether it's racially targeted or not. These things actually mutate. So now you've got a situation where there's been a limited nuclear war in the Middle East, there's a pandemic that really is sweeping across the world and really is killing people very visibly. And you've got this totalitarian military lockdown in all the governments in the Western world because everyone's going to be in panic about all of this. And then, he said, then the real war starts. Something that would be justifiably called the Third World War, with a much more major nuclear exchange. And at this point, I asked him, is this just about population reduction? What is this about? Why are they doing this? Why this insane Dr. Strangelove plan for just unleashing all of this stuff on the world? Why do it? Now, he said absolutely it's about population reduction. So I said, well, in this meeting, did they mention any figures? And he said, yes, they did, 50%. Half the world's population. This is planned as per the Georgia Guidestones. For those of you who don't know what the Georgia Guidestones are, it's a stone monument in Georgia in America that was erected anonymously a number of years ago. It's in 8 languages, and it's like an Illuminati manifesto for a new world, as it were. And just hold that thought about this being a manifesto for a new world. This is an important concept here in what I'm presenting. One of the key parts of this manifesto for this new world is that there should be a population of 500 million people. Now, 500 million people is an enormous reduction from the nearly 7 billion that we've got at the moment. That's pretty much 95% of people who would no longer be on this planet. And 50% is a step towards that. And there's a reason why they're doing all of this. There's a reason why they're in a hurry. There's a reason for this insanity. And when he was explaining this, then he said that they have a name for this plan. This project has got a name. And I said, well, what is this name? He said it is called the Anglo-Saxon Mission. The Anglo-Saxon Mission. Now, I'd heard that before. It was something historical, I think, to do with the Crusades quite a long time ago. But I hadn't heard it in the present day context, and neither had he. The plans that I've been describing are definitely a possibility because he heard them with his own ears in this meeting. Everything I've described up until now, up to and including a major outbreak of hostilities after the limited war. So the sequence is as follows. The planned sequence is as follows. Israel attacks Iran, then there's a ceasefire, then during which time there is heavy governmental military controls over populations in all Western countries. Then China is attacked by a biological weapon. It's a flu-like disease that spreads like wildfire. This goes all over the world, and then they have a major Third World War. And then, by this time, 50% of the population will be destroyed. And not only because of the war or the plague, but because, as many of you watching this will understand, the infrastructure goes down in situations like this. There's no food in the supermarkets, there's no gas in the pumps, the telecommunication goes down, there may not even be water coming out of the taps. People are kind of thrown back into a Victorian era without the facilities to handle this, because most people don't have their vegetable gardens, they don't have their horse and cart, they're not able to survive in the way that we used to be able to. We're very, very vulnerable in our technological advancement. We're extremely vulnerable, and of course the controllers know this. At this stage, our source was speculating about why are they in a hurry? Why do they want to do this? And there's a sort of heavy irony here, which is like, I was saying, well, if you're going to plan the Third World War, then why not take your time over it and get it right and do a really good job? You can, this could be in 20 years' time or 30 years' time, it doesn't really matter. Why is they're in such a rush. And our source said that he felt, from inside information that he's continued to receive, that this is still timed for something around 18 months from now. He doesn't know this for sure because these events aren't calendar driven. They're actually event sequence driven. In other words, this has got to happen before that happens, and then after that the next thing can happen, then after that the next thing can happen. So a whole lot of things have got to be in place before all the dominoes fall over, so to speak. And they seem to be behind schedule in some of this. He says that he's as sure as he can be that the people who are calling the shots in the world, you can call them the Illuminati, the controllers, the cabal, whatever name you have for them, they believe that there is going to be what he called a geophysical event, a major geophysical event. He says that the best information that he's got is that the insiders believe that this is going to happen, or they are concerned that this is going to happen. And many of you watching this will know that this isn't a completely crazy idea. There have been trillions of dollars that have been spent on deep underground bases for some reason which we don't know why it is. Now, if there is going to be a geophysical event as they believe, this is because it seems to be preserved Illuminati inside knowledge, whether it's true or not, that there are repeated cyclical geophysical events about every 11,500 years. Information about what really happened to Atlantis was very probably in the Great Library of Alexandria that burnt down a couple of thousand years ago. And this might be the justification for this insanity that we've just heard about in this plan. Consider this. He said, if there's going to be a major geophysical event, something like a pole shift, maybe it's Planet X, maybe it's some kind of energetic phenomenon that the solar system is going to be moving into, that's going to somehow destabilize the Earth or the Earth's crust in some way, we don't know. But if there were to be a major emergency like that, something that would actually make a war look very inconsequential, the thing that will help the human race to survive it, or will help parts of the human race to survive it, is if there is already emergency preparedness in place before it happens. Our source suggests that the reason for this whole Third World War scenario is that then the Western governments, with the Chinese out of the way, will be in a state of such totalitarian control of their own population that they will be best equipped to recover and rebuild the new world after a cataclysm. And he thinks that this is what's happening. And I have to tell you that this terrible logic makes sense to me, that they would think that way. But if they believe that it's going to happen, then this could be their justification for this kind of plan that we've heard about is really being discussed. It's called the Anglo-Saxon mission. What that told me was that the reason for the name is because this is a white racist agenda for the inheriting of the new earth. It's a plan that Hitler would be proud of. If they think that a new earth needs to be rebuilt, a new world, think of that little phrase there, if a new world needs to be rebuilt after a cataclysm, they want the Anglo-Saxons to be doing it. They don't want the Chinese to be doing it. They get the Chinese out of the way first, and then the Anglo-Saxons will inherit this new world with the other nations, the Asian nations, the African nations, the South American nations. Presumably, it is assumed that they won't have the resources to be able to handle the situation in any kind of a way that gives them the strength to recover after whatever it is that they think is going to occur.